I am Wi-Fi Dave on Twitter. That's probably how I know a lot of you guys. But I do see a lot of faces out here in the audience that I don't know. So I hope that over the course of the next 3 days, I'll have a chance to hang out with you and get to know you. That's certainly one of the reasons that I am here. A bit about me. I started in data networking back in the 1992 timeframe when I was actually still in the Marine Corps. So hence the military history. Interest on my part. Transitioned out into the civilian sector, was a network administrator for a few years, ended up with a vendor, and ended up supporting Qualcomm. I didn't work at Qualcomm, but I worked with Qualcomm on quite a lot of projects, both on their enterprise IT side, but then also on their wireless development side. And that's where I kind of got started with wireless in the late 90s. Working with them, that was back in the time frame when they were developing what they called HDR, which became 1X EV data only. Got commercialized and then kind of morphed into some follow-on technologies, wideband CDMA, which intrinsic part of LTE. Started working with a large networking vendor on the cellular data space, so working on PDSNs and SGSNs, which are data serving nodes, serving gateways for the cellular carriers. And about that same time, late 90s, also really started working with Wi-Fi more. So I've been with Ruckus for about 2.5 years now, working in the tech marketing group there. And I've got a focus on the public and carrier markets. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but I actually think that carrier is a subset of public, so it's a little bit redundant to say that I work in public and carrier, but nevertheless, that's the way my position is titled. So, what are we talking about today? I should have called this public access, because that's really what the conversation's about. The first half of it will be talking about public Wi-Fi. Just want to talk about some of the successes we've seen Wi-Fi having in the public access space, and also a few of the challenges, and then talk specifically about Hotspot 2.0. If you have seen me on Twitter, you know that I'm a pretty big advocate for the technology. We'll certainly talk about that at a relatively high level. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth, but we'll touch on that, and then after talking about Wi-Fi, the second half of this is going to be really focusing on some public access proposals out of the licensed spectrum industry. So we'll be talking about licensed small cells, specifically indoor licensed small cells. We'll talk about LAA, or license assisted access, and that is also the technology formerly known as LTEU. So I know that LTEU came up in the CWNE roundtable. And now if you're a 3GPP hipster, you'd actually say LAA and not LTEU. So you want to make a note of that. And lastly, we'll talk about terrestrial low power service, or TLPS, which I know has been something that's been addressed by Lee, and I think Devin has written about it as well. And we had that great Whiskey and Wi-Fi episode on it recently as well. In terms of questions, if I have time, I'll take some questions at the after the public Wi-Fi section. Sorry, forgot to advance my slide. So the second half of the presentation will be on the topics here on other alternatives for public access. Take some questions halfway if we have time, and then certainly at the end. So, okay. So I stole this from a presentation that was given at the Wireless Broadband Alliance conference. This was November 2012 timeframe, and somebody who's actually going to be presenting later at the WLPC conference actually put this slide up. For those of you who don't know WBA, it is an industry consortium made up of a number of operators. Historically, it was sort of a mobile operator organization. It's become a lot more balanced over the last few years, where there's mobile and fixed operators, and then vendors. And the purpose of it largely at this point is to promote the deployment of Hotspot 2.0 technology. They have a program they call Next Generation Hotspot, and it's about deployment of Hotspot 2.0 deployment guidelines and then interoperability between operators. So my friend gets up, makes his presentation. His last closing slide posed this question essentially of 5 years in the future, what would the landscape look like? And it was one where Wi-Fi was widespread and was the primary access, and cellular filled in the gaps. And this certainly resonated with me. It's something that I've held to as an eventuality, essentially since the 2000 timeframe. And it's one of the reasons that I'm not a huge fan of the term 3G or 4G offload. You may have seen me kind of comment about that on Twitter. I know Stoney used it in his presentation, not a slam on him, because it's just something that I think a lot of people tend to fall into. There are legitimate cases for the term 3G offload. I mean, if a MNO is faced with building out their own cellular infrastructure to provide capacity or coverage, especially in an urban environment, and in lieu of that, they either deploy their own Wi-Fi or they leverage somebody else's existing footprint through some sort of roaming agreement. That's where Hotspot 2.0 would come in. Then I think that is a legitimate case of 3G offload, because traffic that would have gone over 3G is now going over Wi-Fi. On the other hand, I think a lot of analysts and reporters have now gotten to the point where any Wi-Fi usage of a smartphone is considered offload, and it's just not real. It's not realistic. I mean, there's a lot of traffic that goes over Wi-Fi in your home, in your office, and even out in a public environment that simply would not have gone over a cellular data service. It would have either been deferred until you got to a Wi-Fi location, or it just wouldn't have been sent in the first place. So I'm an advocate of the term cellular fallback, because I think that's a better description of how most users use the different wireless technologies that are available to them. They primarily use Wi-Fi, and they fall back to cellular when it's available, or when Wi-Fi is not available, pardon me. So to back that up, this is one data point. A little company called Mobidia out of the Northwest. I forget exactly where. I can't remember if they're US or Canadian, but I really like these guys, and I would encourage you to look at their reports. Until 2012, when they first started coming out with some of the reports, I really felt like the wireless data forecasts that were coming out were largely, this sort of activity where people were taking some data and then extrapolating and making, some assumptions about the overall global trends. What Mobidia does is they have an app that you can download for Android or for iOS. It's called My Data Manager. I don't get a commission if you download their app. But the value prop to the end user is that you put in your cellular data plan parameters. I've got 2 gigabytes a month, and then this thing will alert you when you get to 75% or 90%, and it's basically a data plan management tool for the end user. You've got about 9 million downloads, and the nice thing about it is that if you don't, let's see, I'm trying to remember if it's opt-in or opt-out. I think it's opt-in. If you opt into anonymous data reporting, then on a daily basis, they collect your stats, how much your data is going over your cellular radio, how much of it's going over Wi-Fi, what apps are using it, all this stuff. And it gets sent back to the cloud, and then they produce reports like this that we're looking at. So they've got about 2 million users who are providing daily reports on their usage. They've got statistically significant information for about 60 countries. And this is one of the reports. So I like to, when I throw stuff up, I try to back it up with a little bit of, where is it coming from? I know VNI is another, commonly cited, source of wireless data statistics. The latest mobile VNI came out today. Don't know if you know that, but it was just released this morning. I haven't really had a chance to look over it too much. In the past, when I've gotten into the details, I've really been concerned that it understates the amount of Wi-Fi usage. Same thing for the Ericsson Mobility Report. I just feel like there's a little bit of vendor motivation there that isn't the case with the Mobidia. On the other hand, there's probably some sample bias here. What kind of people are going to download this app to track their usage? Sure, that's a valid point. So there is sample bias. Anyhow, to the chart. This is the third quarter of last year for US subscribers. Yes, they had a little typo there, but I'm a North Carolinian and I'm presenting in Texas, so average seems okay. So But bottom line here is that for their subscribers, for their app users in the U.S., they've got 80% of the usage is going over Wi-Fi. It was 82% specifically for iOS, 78% for Android. I think this is, having been around the industry for a while, that is the data networking industry for a while, I think there are parallels here to what's gone on in the past. Ethernet and token ring, IP, and just about any other layer 3 protocol. What is common and ubiquitous and easy to deploy and low cost tends to get the majority of the usage. I'm not saying that cellular is going the way of those other technologies. I certainly don't think that, but I do think it puts Wi-Fi at a distinct advantage for data usage. So I was preparing this just yesterday, actually. I mean, I wasn't preparing this yesterday, but I was going over it yesterday. Mobidia put out this little update, which just thought it was worth showing. So this is showing that for year over year, so December 2014 versus December 2013, and now we've got data for 3 different countries, 3 different regions as well. So Europe, North America, and APAC are represented here. And what you'll see is not only is Wi-Fi usage, about 80%, but now we're seeing that Wi-Fi is also growing at a faster rate. So off of that already high base, we're seeing Wi-Fi is outgrowing cellular in terms of data usage. So not a surprise to me anyways, but it's something that we should all be grateful for as Wi-Fi professionals, and certainly has implications as we get further into the conversation. So, public access or public Wi-Fi specifically, what is it? I think terminology is important, and we don't always use the same terms with the same things in mind. So, there are a number of ways you probably could define it. I guess the smart-ass way of saying it would just be any Wi-Fi that's not private is public, and well, okay, but how helpful is that? Keith has written a series of blog articles or blog posts on, what he thinks the characteristics of good public Wi-Fi are. You should all know this by heart at this point. Fast, free, and easy, right? Yeah, it came up in the CWNE. So, I think those are fine principles, especially as an end user. I'm not going to get into the free thing. I know Kevin chimed in on that a little while ago on Twitter, as a matter of fact. But that's how Keith or the characteristics that he has for it. The definition that I would use, and I will be using, or you should have in mind as we get into this, is any Wi-Fi that's available for public usage, whether it's free or paid. And it's a relatively blanket statement, but I would contend that public Wi-Fi certainly encompasses all of those use cases, and it's not just stuff that you would find out in outside of the office, right? So by this definition, if you're offering guest Wi-Fi when people come in to your reception areas or your conference rooms, then that's technically public Wi-Fi as well. And some of this is related to sort of the delineation between carrier and enterprise, and I find that line getting awfully blurry these days as well, because in the enterprise, I mean, we're selling an enterprise kit, or a lot of people are purchasing enterprise kit, and it's getting deployed by service providers into enterprises. Enterprises are deploying kit, and they're using it for guest Wi-Fi, so I find some of these distinctions that we're making awfully hard to keep straight. And I don't think they necessarily capture things all that well sometimes. So this is my definition. And again, I think this supports my position earlier that carrier Wi-Fi is a subset of public. It's not distinctly separate, it's a part of it. Kind of going back to those Mobidia slides, 80% of traffic in the US going over Wi-Fi, the rate of growth for Wi-Fi increasing. And what I think it highlights is the fact that we've really entered an age where Wi-Fi is expected. I first did this slide, I had Wi-Fi as an amenity, and then I thought about it for a while, and I was like, No, that, amenity kind of implies venue, and I didn't really want to, denote that. I think we just are in an age where Wi-Fi is expected. Certainly, here in the developed world, but even overseas now, this is more and more the case. It's especially a generational phenomenon. There's an article in the New York Times, this is probably 3 or 4 months ago now. It was actually talking about teens preferring technology over fashion these days, and how that kind of, their cultural values or generational values have shifted away from cool clothes to cool tech. And what I found fascinating was a couple of the interviews they had with teenagers where they were saying, as teenagers, we now seek out businesses that offer free Wi-Fi because we need to be connected. And I guess they're poor, so they're trying to avoid cellular data charges. And San Francisco, the city of San Francisco is trying to figure out how to get kids to come back to their parks. So they actually got together a little sample group, did some surveys, and the number one thing that the kids said would get them back to the parks was Wi-Fi access. So, and now they've deployed it. So, I certainly think it's a generational thing. When you look overseas, there are, many billions of people who are not, online, and some of them are now getting online. I'm thinking specifically about South Africa, where I was a few months ago. There's an organization over there called Project Isizwe, I-S-I-Z-W-E, that I'd highly recommend you brush up on. They're deploying Wi-Fi to townships in South Africa that have not had any access at all, not even licensed cellular. So people are going out getting, very low-end Android devices, maybe without a cellular plan whatsoever, and they're able to connect. And I think it's about 250 megabyte cap or something per day. But these people are getting online for the first time, and they're able to tap into all the resources that you and I take for granted on a daily basis, and it can be life-changing for them. And it's stuff like that kind of makes me back up and remember that what we're doing, has real impact on people. So Africa, Indonesia, there are a lot of markets where the economics don't support widespread use of licensed data plans. So Wi-Fi is the preferred technology there. And you look at some of the companies who are making significant investments in those markets, and specifically with Wi-Fi, and there's some big names behind it. So the Facebooks, Googles, Microsofts of the world are certainly looking at those markets and how to get those people connected so that they can tap into their services. Let's see. Last week there was an article saying that Chicago residents now are going to be able to go to the library and check out an access point. I don't know if you saw that. So you get your library card, you go to the library, and they're going to have some number of APs that you can check out. So Wi-Fi Forward, another organization which sort of promotes Wi-Fi and unlicensed, they've had some reports out now talking about just the economic advantages of having Wi-Fi and sort of the social gap that's being created there. So again, Wi-Fi is a force for change. We're hearing this from, not just tech people, we're hearing it from FCC commissioners, we're hearing it from municipal officials, we're hearing it for social advocates. Wi-Fi is expected, and I'd say this is going back to the '99 timeframe when I remember, people saying, well, why am I going to pay to put this Wi-Fi stuff in my coffee shop? It just didn't compute for them. To 3 or 4 years later, it was, if I don't have this Wi-Fi stuff in my coffee shop, my customers are going somewhere else. And I think we're at that same point where it is now shifted to, if any portion of my business has some public-facing aspect to it, and I don't have guest Wi-Fi, I'm at a disadvantage. I'm at a competitive disadvantage. So I think I've probably beat this slide to death. I do want to. I'm hesitant to put that up there, but I will, because I know Stoney just took a few arrows for citing iPass, but whatever. So iPass says that by 2018 there'll be a hotspot for every 20 people. I think Colleen and Daryl maybe think that's low, or high, right? So you think there'll be actually more hotspots or more hotspots available, so a lower ratio than that, which that sounds good to me. I've got a friend, Thomas Wehmeyer, who he was an analyst at Informa, and now he's at a VC firm over in Europe. He made this comment a few years ago, I think it was 2012, just any place where people stop for more than a few minutes will eventually be a hotspot. And I agree with him. So public Wi-Fi is great. I love it, and I do. However, I think that to a certain extent, it's been an amazing success story in spite of itself. And this gets into the challenges. So I would contend that until recently, most of the public access uses of Wi-Fi have sort of, or the technologies that we've used to make Wi-Fi work for public access have been afterthoughts and adaptations, is what I would contend. And that's left us with, captive portals and Whisper and a long list of other things and dynamic pre-shared keys and stuff to try to make it somewhat work for us. But what we're still left with, in my mind, is the ease of access is an issue and security is an issue. And I know we were just having a little Twitter conversation even during the CWNE roundtable about the use of MiFis, and Blake mentioned that he thought that if we make it, I think he said fast and easy, right? Yeah, so fast and easy, that'll cut down on MiFi usage. I would agree with that. I know Lee may throw something at me, but that's okay. I think it'll help it'll help limit the use of MiFi, and I agree with Lee. There's a cultural issue there that needs to be addressed, but I think security is an issue also. For the connectivity examples, I go to Target. I think Andrew did a fine job architecting that, and I think all you have to do at this point is just like accept some T's and C's, when you go to Target and use their guest Wi-Fi. And I get my prescriptions filled there, so I'm there relatively frequently, but I find that, a lot of the time I don't even bother to take my phone out of my pocket and click the T's and C's just because, it doesn't come to mind and I don't have anything pressing to do. So again, there's traffic that either is not going out at all because of the way I've got my apps configured on my phone, or it's going over my LTE connection and hitting my plan. And it's stuff that could have gone over that Target Wi-Fi network that's sitting there and it's a perfectly viable network. I'm just not taking the time to get on it. And it's an issue. So that would be connectivity, and we could talk about the London Underground. And what we're doing is we're forcing people to do a cost-benefit analysis. Is it worth me taking the X number of seconds, 30 seconds, 45 seconds, whatever it is it worth me taking that time to connect to this network? How long am I going to be here? What do I need to do? And we need to stop that. We need to move beyond this, mental game. And then the other thing is security. So I see 1 to 2 stories a week on public Wi-Fi security, and I'm sure you guys do as well. This one just seems so appropriate, so I had to snag it. So I saw this over the weekend. It was CNBC, and this is sort of fallout from the whole Marriott thing. But she took it in a little bit of a different direction. The reporter did, saying that, well, now that we can use our MiFis, one of the reasons you should use your MiFi is because this hotel Wi-Fi isn't secure to begin with. So, I just thought it was somewhat ironic that, we're having these debates online about, well, should we be able to block, should we not be able to block, and, lots of good conversation, and it just, the final verdict was, well, just use your MiFi because it's secure. So, again, I would go back to if it's fast, easy, and secure, you will help people not to use their MiFi. I was just asking Ryan and do people leave their MiFis on 24/7? I guess some people do. I mean, I tether when I have no other alternative. I mean, that's really where I'm at. But I think if we make it so easy that you can walk into a venue, you connected to the Wi-Fi, it happens automatically, you've got a secure air link, then Wi-Fi use will go down. So I will contend that, I will argue it, love to talk more over a beer about it. So I probably need to pick up the pace, but I did think it was funny this morning. I got connected for the first time at the hotel this morning, and I'm like, whoa, okay, so I know Jake's nearby, and I know he's playing with his pineapple. So, so the next thing I did was load Wi-Fi Explorer. I don't know, Adrian, if you're in here, you can pay me later, but loaded Wi-Fi Explorer and checked the BSSID before I bothered to connect to Hyatt. So, okay. Hotspot 2.0. I'm gonna really put a plug in for Daryl and Colleen's presentation. I think they're doing one on Thursday at 8:30. Pardon me, I look into the mic. So Thursday at 8:30, there's going to be another presentation. They're going to talk a little bit about Hotspot 2.0. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I can bore you to tears about it if you want, later. But I would say it's the first, or it's a technology based on the first spec that was really focused specifically on the public use case, right? So 802.11u. And it was one of the things that really got me excited and got me excited about public access and the potential for Wi-Fi here. Hotspot 2.0 addresses the ease of access and the security concerns. So it's 802.11. It's WPA2 enterprise security, and then we are putting credentials onto devices, and those devices are going to connect and authenticate whenever they're in range of a network supporting those credentials. And it's really that simple at a very high level. This is really one of the things that I'm hoping to leave you with is, Ben, did I get a no back there? Are you disagreeing with me?
I'm just waiting for the explanation.
Okay, all right. I just saw that. Okay, so my goal is that when Ben walks out of the room, he's going to believe that Hotspot 2.0 is not a carrier technology. So let's be clear. What I'm not saying is that Hotspot 2.0 does not have applicability to the carriers. It most certainly does. But what I am saying is that Hotspot 2.0 was not developed by the carrier community. So 802.11u came out of IEEE. Hotspot 2.0 is a program out of the Wi-Fi Alliance. There was certainly participation in both of those programs by people who work in the carrier industry, but there was a participation by a lot of people who don't. And there's nothing inherently about the technology which makes it carrier specific. And it supports carrier and non-carrier credentials. So there's basically 3 credential types supported with Hotspot 2.0. You've got cellular credentials, so you can use the SIM or the USIM, certainly. You can use a username and password with TTLS. You can use a client certificate with TLS. So these are not things that have to originate with a carrier. Those credentials don't. When we look at the deployments that have happened, I'll talk a little bit more about that with the release 1 portion, but when you look at the deployments that have happened, yes, some carriers have already deployed the technology, but there are many deployments that don't involve a carrier at all. I was involved in the municipal project we did with the cities of San Francisco and San Jose. As a resident or a guest of either of those cities, you can go and connect to the municipal Wi-Fi networks that they have built out. You can download a anonymous credential, so username, password, generic credential. They didn't want to track anyone. They didn't want to have knowledge of anyone in particular. So you can download that credential, and then you can use that credential from then on to automatically and securely connect to either city. So you can actually download the San Francisco credential and connect in San Jose and vice versa. They've now entered into a roaming agreement with some municipal networks that are operated over in London, and there's a few more cities that are planning to come online in the first half of this year. That has nothing to do with a carrier. Carriers are very interested in those footprints, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But there's nothing to prohibit you from making use of those. You don't have to be a subscriber of anyone, and you don't have to pay a cent to do so. So I'd encourage you to check them out if you haven't. Further support for this, the WFA has put out Passpoint Release 2 just came out in October. Talk about that. They just put out some deployment guidelines for Release 2. The Passpoint Release 2 deployment guidelines include a section 12, which is called Free Public Hotspot 2.0 Based Hotspots. And it actually is, a codification, if you will, of the work that we did in San Francisco and San Jose to use, non-user specific credentials for access. Not just a carrier technology, think about the enterprise. So I know Lee's doing a session later, I think, on what he wants from a guest access solution. The BYOD thing gets beat to death, as it rightly should. Hotspot 2.0 is a technology that can help with both of those things. It can be viewed as a next-gen BYOD and guest access technology. That's certainly dependent upon client support, but it provides provides the hooks at the protocol and onboarding level that we need to address those issues in the enterprise. I know Lee's here. Do we have any other higher ed folks in the room? Okay. Eduroam. I was here last year. I don't know why Keith invited me back, but I was here last year and I was speaking on Hotspot 2.0, and I mentioned Eduroam as a precursor. And it's something that I've held for a long time, is that if we want to look at what the potential future holds for Hotspot 2.0, we could look to Eduroam. So for those of you who don't know, and I could probably have these guys explain it a lot better than I can, but what Eduroam is it's a service that links university campuses around the world. Kind of started mostly in Europe and then spread to Asia, and then it's really been taken off in North America, the US, last maybe a couple of years. And it requires you to roll out a special SSID, Eduroam. It's an 802.1x SSID, and then you link your user store into a Radius AAA hierarchy that's administered by Eduroam. And the benefit is that your students can then travel to any other participating institution, and when they get there, their devices auto-connect to the SSID, because it's a known SSID, and they can perform WPA2 enterprise to that network using their home credential, because it's getting routed back through Radius Realm routing, right? Pretty cool. And I follow a guy, Alan Buxley, on Twitter, and he often sends or he retweets the tweets that come in from students who are just so excited because they just get connected. It's secure, it's automatic when they're traveling university to university. So that in and of itself is cool. But what I find even more fascinating is that I haven't seen it in the US yet, but in Europe, you've got now commercial venues supporting Eduroam. So if you go to Norway, just about any airport in Norway, you'll see the Eduroam. Or Sweden. Okay, thank you.
Because we started it.
All right, good. So here we go. So the Eduroam SSID is there. So if you happen to be fortunate enough, and I've been trying as an alumni to get an Eduroam credential for a while through my alma mater, but they won't. But if you're fortunate enough to have one of these Eduroam credentials, you can now connect in Sweden and Norway's airports. They'll even allow off-campus, coffee shops and businesses like that to start advertising the service. So it just basically shows the value in having automatic and secure connectivity. And they recently kind of leaked on Twitter that they're planning a new service. Not a lot of details on this, but there's going to be a new service called AnyRoam. You can do a Google search, and there's a website which says absolutely nothing at this point. But AnyRoam would be a public access version of Eduroam. And it looks like they would be supplying the credentials, and it looks like it would work over the Eduroam SSID. There might be a new AnyRoam SSID, and it looks like it will also support Hotspot 2.0. So you could potentially, use that as a Wi-Fi operator. You could have AnyRoam as one of your back-end authentication providers as a possibility. So it's not just a carrier technology. Ben, we cool?
Feels good.
All right, we'll talk later. Release 1, real quick, I've got to pick up the pace looking at the time. Release 1 came out in June of 2012, it's been around for a while. Samsung came out with support in April 13 timeframe. Apple came out with it in iOS 7, so fall of 14. The deployments, we've got a number of operator deployments, Europe, Asia, North America. We have some municipal deployments now, specifically in North America and London, with some more cities coming. Let's see. Provisioning has been an issue. When Apple came out with their support, they extended the mobile configuration profile framework to support Hotspot 2.0 credential provisioning. So that's been helpful, and that's why for non-cellular deployments or non-SIM, ePSIM, ePKA deployments, they've largely been focused on Apple because it was relatively easy to put a username password credential onto a supported Apple client using a mobile config profile. Some other limitations around the ongoing management of the subscription, so there wasn't really a good way to sort of maintain contact with a user or a subscriber after you'd given them a credential. You could, with Apple's system, you can expire the mobile config, right? But that's about it. So not a good solution necessarily for short-term or for prepaid type use cases. Also tended to be focused mostly on internal users. Although we've got our first Hotspot 2.0 roaming arrangement now as of December. Boingo and TWC announced something in June, and then it went live in December. So as a Boingo subscriber, you can connect on the TWC footprint and reciprocally. So that's pretty cool, and that's really one of the benefits. You're starting to see people looking at how to link their footprints and leverage them. MSOs have been doing it for a while with the whole cable Wi-Fi initiative, but the scaling of the whole SSID scaling issue and maintenance of all these different apps to support the connection manager connectivity are kind of painful. So they're definitely looking at Hotspot 2.0 as a way to kind of consolidate on a single SSID, and then also to rely on standard client implementations. Excuse me. So provisioning was an issue with Release 1. Short-term credentials, and then also the client support. So client support is relatively fragmented. Apple did it their way using XML and the mobile config profiles. On the Android side, nobody did it the same way. They pretty much all used just the WPA2 supplicant in the root, but how they actually configured it was a little bit different. So Samsung had their implementation, HTC had theirs, etc. So the pass point effect, a few lessons that we've learned with Release 1. Time Warner, they launched in April 1st, and they had some year-end targets for how many subscribers they hoped would take the service up. They hit those targets in the July-August timeframe, so about 3 to 4 months into their 8-month window, they had already met the take rate. And they really led with security as the primary benefit to the service. They weren't really stressing the automatic connectivity piece. They were much more focused on secure public access. And again, they've got uptake of about twice what they expected. If you'd like to know more about sort of how they handled the provisioning thing, I'd be happy to talk about it later. Boingo, they have a lot of information on their legacy subscribers and what their usage patterns are at their locations, and what they've done recently is started comparing their legacy users with their Passpoint users. And what they see is about 10 times more sessions from the Passpoint users, which I don't find that surprising at all. I mean, you could literally walk into an airport where they've got the Passpoint secure SSID operational, never take it out of your pocket, and it's connected at passing traffic, right? And 2 times increase in bandwidth, which again, if it automatically connects, then you're probably going to pass a little bit more traffic over it. So there's a lot of public Wi-Fi that's out there that's underutilized, in my opinion. And Hotspot 2.0 gets users onto the network. And as companies like these also start looking at, trying to to do more with ad-based revenue, subsidizing the cost of the service to the end user through ad-based. It's really helpful for them to be able to put up statistics like this showing that, hey, Mr. Advertiser will actually get people onto our network. And so anywho. Release 1, again, Wireless Broadband Alliance has a conference twice a year. Last one was San Francisco in October. I helped set this network up. They call it the Next Generation Hotspot Experience. What we did, since the city has this footprint along Market Street, which is sort of there in blue, the diagonal stripe, that's the city's network along Market Street. Then we set up a network at the Palace Hotel where the conference was going on. And then Tower Stream, who's sort of a metro wireless wholesaler, they had a footprint down at Fisherman's Wharf. So 3 separate footprints run by 3 different operators. And then we linked in 18 different authentication providers on the backside of this. So these are all pretty much WBA members, some mobile companies, some mobile operators, some cable operators, and a few just industry players as well. And what we saw, and I thought this was just a fantastic demonstration of the possibilities with Hotspot 2.0, was that the utilization on the city's footprint certainly went up. I should sort of back up and say, there was no real market preparation for this. We just rolled it out. So the Friday before the conference, I sat down in the office of the IT, the network administrator for the city, and we turned up the roaming for these different back-end authentication providers. So you just go in and say, we're going to advertise this NAI realm, and we're going to advertise these mobile country codes and mobile network codes, and we'll just see what happens, right? We had, aside from the people who are coming in specifically for the conference, there had been no preparation, to see what would go on. And on the city's network, over the course of the week of the conference, they saw that their utilization went up about 30%. And then over on the right, I don't know if you can see that very well, but I'll describe it if not. Those are the 18 operators and how many unique users they saw, how many sessions, and how much data was transferred. The top one is a North American operator that has readily available credentials, and we connected over 1,000 of their subscribers during the course of 5 days and offloaded about 18 gigabytes of traffic. So we actually did a little bit more analysis around that. It turned out about, I think it was 92%. Yeah, it was 92 or 93% of these were Samsung clients based on the OUI. And with Samsung, all you have to do is enable Passpoint. And if you're doing ePSIM, it can derive everything from the MC. So simply enable Passpoint, and it'll derive the mobile country code, mobile network code from the MC. Start looking for that. If it sees that, it'll try to connect and then perform ePSIM for the authentication. So it was a pretty compelling demonstration of what you can do. And for again, for a licensed operator, this is really important in terms of being able to avoid having to build out more capacity, more licensed capacity, potentially for their subscribers. Release 2, I have a video, but I don't have time to play it. So I'm just going to tell you what it does. It addresses all the issues that I talked about with Release 1. So Release 2 supports online sign-up. So with Hotspot 2.0 Release 2, you come into a venue or a Hotspot 2.0 venue. You don't have a credential there. You'll actually be notified. So you get essentially a layer 2 notification that Hotspot 2.0 is available, and it'll ask you, do you want to sign up? You'll get a little icon. You'll see the icon of the provider. You'll see a little descriptor of that provider. And if you want to enroll, you can click on that and go through an enrollment process, be provisioned with a credential. It introduces a whole bunch of other stuff. There's a whole PKI on the back end of this now. So the WFA is actually contracted with three different CA providers All Release 2 clients will have PKI trust roots installed on the clients. They'll be able to authenticate all of the server-side components. They'll also even potentially be able to do this whole onboarding process over a secured WLAN. So there's a new WFA network type, WLAN type. It's called an OSIN, or an online sign-up encrypted network. And it's essentially server authenticated only. So the client authenticates the server does not authenticate the client, or I should say the network in that case. So it standardizes, Release 2 standardizes the format and the storage of the credential. So we get over this issue where we had a lot of fragmentation on how the clients were supporting this. Still be up to the client vendors to decide what the UI looks like, but the credentials and the parameters around the use of the credentials are all going to be stored as a common XML blob. It's called a PPSMO if you care. Yeah, so those are the big things. There's some things around operator policy and subscription management. So I can, if I want to issue a credential that expires after 7 days, I can do that. When it expires, I can bring the guy back to a page portal to touch him again. So this sort of addresses one of the issues that people have had with Hotspot 2.0 of, hey, I lose all contact with my customer, my subscriber, my user. Once I put the credential on the device. That was a complaint with Release 1. Release 2 has some mechanisms to address it. So going to move on. Other technologies that could impact public Wi-Fi. And I put public there sort of in faded out text because really it could affect Wi-Fi, right? I mean, some of these they're not going to discriminate. They're not going to know whether the Wi-Fi is public or private or any other kind. They're just going to potentially be there. So looking at the clock, indoor licensed small cells, we'll touch briefly on that. I want to spend most of my time probably on LAA. I know it came up in key CWNE roundtable, and I think that's probably the one that I would want to provide the most information to you about. And then TLPS, I'll touch on it. So licensed small cells, saying licensed small cells, or actually saying licensed kind of eliminates half of the ecosystem, right? Because if you just say small cell, it really includes Wi-Fi. I mean, Wi-Fi is inherently a small cell technology in my mind. It just happens to be unlicensed. But even when you say licensed small cell, it's a very encompassing term. It's like saying Wi-Fi, right? So when you look at what are the options for licensed small cells, I'm just going to let this slide go. But it's a broad spectrum of solutions and target markets. So we're all familiar with, I would assume we're all familiar with femtos and how those sort of popped up as a way to get better indoor residential voice coverage. Some of the frequencies don't propagate all that well indoors, or through walls, I should say. And depending on distances from the macro site, you just weren't getting good coverage, so we came out with femtos. Great. First example of a licensed small cell. That has led to sort of all of these things now. And the license industry is looking at how to leverage their spectrum investment, obviously, and they're also looking at where the demand is going, and it's going towards data, and it's going indoors. Data demand tends to be indoors. 80% is the commonly cited figure. I don't see any reason to argue with it too much. In terms of how the whole sort of history of licensed small cells has played out, the best example, or the best way to look at it, the best lens to look at it through is probably the Small Cell Forum, which is sort of an organization analogous to Wi-Fi Alliance, I would say, to promote licensed small cell technology. They have 4 releases. Release 1 was the home, so kind of femto, if you will. Release 2 is enterprise, so sort of licensed small cells for the indoor enterprise. And releases 3 and 4 are both outdoor. 3 is rural and 4 is urban, I had to remember. So and there's some history there too. They'd originally been focusing a little bit more on the outdoor use cases, but the integration of the small cell layer with the macro layer gets pretty tricky to make sure you're not creating more of a problem than a solution. So that's why they kind of tackled the enterprise in release 2, and now the release 3 and release 4 are going to be focusing more on the outdoor, rural, and urban. At this point, licensed small cells really focus on 2 primary use cases. So there's the outdoor densification of the macro layer. So especially in urban environments, they can't put up more huge towers. They're looking at trying to roll out, lower power, lower cost small cell sites underneath the macro layer that would augment the coverage and the capacity. So that's the first one, outdoor densification. And the second one is indoor/enterprise. So the terms, again, terminology is often used imprecisely, but they're typically referred to as indoor enterprise. And the idea here is just that you would provide, coverage indoors for, for a venue, and it certainly could be an enterprise or it could be public access. Let's see. So I would say at this point, there's definitely momentum around outdoor small cells. We look over to Asia, and you can see significant deployments by operators like KDDI, KDDI is in Japan, KT and SKT in Korea have both rolled out metro cell deployments to cover some of the cities in Korea, and they're handling a lot of traffic. On the indoor side, I think it's been a little bit slower to take off. There are some reasons for that. I think as the use cases have shifted more from voice to data, it's been harder for them to make the case for indoor license for data coverage or capacity. But you'll see a lot of articles now sort of trying to make that case. The other reason for indoors slow uptake, neutral host is a little bit of an issue. So right now, most of the small cell solutions, actually pretty much all of the small cell solutions are operator specific. So you would purchase a small cell that would support a certain operator's band, deploy it indoors. It would link back into their either 3G or 4G core, for management. And if you wanted to, so that'd be great for operator A's subscribers who happen to be your employees. But then if you wanted to provide that same level of service for another operator, you'd potentially be looking at another set of hardware to do that, and all the backhaul and whatnot. So neutral host has been an issue. Okay. I would say that LAA, and we'll get into LAA here in a second, LAA is specifically now tied to indoor small cells. So there's a fair amount of LAA activity at the Consumer Electronics Show last month, and it was, again, tied to the indoor use case. So I truly believe that cellular and Wi-Fi are complementary technologies, just like peanut butter and chocolate, and we can probably have a conversation about how much peanut butter makes the chocolate taste better. But we need both. There's no doubt about that. So outdoor coverage, high mobility, rural coverage. I mean, we're not going to handle that with Wi-Fi anytime soon. So I do view licensed and unlicensed as complementary. But I thought this was a kind of sort of simple but profound point that this guy from Current Analysis made. That specifically with regards to indoor licensed LAA and even TLPS, you really have to make an argument for Wi-Fi's insufficiency in some regard, right? And historically, with indoor license, that has been about Wi-Fi's insufficiency to provide voice services. And now with Wi-Fi calling and wireless workplace initiatives, I think there's some reason to call that into question in terms of the validity of even indoor voice coverage being insufficient with Wi-Fi. This isn't a morally right or wrong statement, right? We're not. I thought it was interesting when Keith brought up LAA, LTEU during the CWNE roundtable, And I think it was don't do it, don't do it, just don't do it. And then it was Mike and Keith who said, well, it's unlicensed. So, there's if they abide by the rules, as loose as they are, we really can't prohibit them from playing there. So, just something to think about. So insufficiency, we'll talk about some of the insufficiencies. On licensed indoor, this was a forecast that was made in December, so just a couple months ago. Joe Madden is an analyst with a firm called Mobile Experts. He's been studying the cellular industry for 15 or more years at this point. And he just done some revisions to his forecast for licensed small cells downwards. And he specifically cited Hotspot 2.0 and Wi-Fi calling as things that he thought would impact the uptake or the need for indoor license. So I thought that was worth showing. It's also worth thinking about that the DAS market. Everybody, I think a lot of us in the Wi-Fi industry tend to see DAS as sort of a dying technology. DAS market is growing about 30% right now, year over year, because there's still a lot of demand in those high-density venues for voice coverage. And I think that's fascinating in the light of sort of the advent of small cells, that the DAS market is still growing, because the economic advantages are clear with small cells over DAS, and yet DAS still continues to take off. Not take off, but still continues to grow. So, I better hurry up. But I think it's just an indication that there's some hurdles or some barriers that still need to be crossed in order for indoor license to take off. Okay, so where do I want to spend the rest of the time? LAA, LTE license assisted access. So at a high level, the idea is basically to augment LTE data speeds using unlicensed spectrum. This was first suggested in November timeframe 2013, and it was taken up by the 3GPP RAN, or Radio Access Network group, and brought to the plenary of 3GPP, and as of, I think it was September of last year, it became a study item of 3GPP. So we're in the study item phase right now, and it's expected that it will become a work item in June of this year, with it looking to be standardized in release 13. So 3GPP release 13 is sort of the target release for LAA. So there's sort of lots of conflicting information about timelines on this. I've seen stories out of Korea saying that client support won't be here until 2016, and yet we've got some vendors saying they'll have access points, small cells supporting LAA by the end of this year. It looks like there'll be some chipsets, client chipsets out by the end of this year as well. T-Mobile was recently in the press saying that they wanted to do some trials with LAA by the end of the year. So, towards the end of the year, early next year, we may start seeing some trials of the technology. Kind of going back to the, don't do it, just don't do it attitude towards LTU. We're kind of past that point now, honestly. I mean, 3GPP is moving forward with this. So what I would recommend to all of you is that you start trying to get involved to the extent that you can with that effort. This slide, or the excerpt on the slide, is actually from a communication that 3GPP made to IEEE last month. So the chairman of the 3GPP's RAN committee came and presented to IEEE. This is just sort of at a high level what it is. So I'm going to use the next slide to talk about it a little bit more. So what's really on the table at this point is this version of license-assisted access. And it's what's called supplemental downlink. So I started late, so I get more time. I just wanted to preempt him. So the concept here is that we've got licensed spectrum that are doing our uplink/control and our downlink, primary downlink in the license band. So whatever spectrum that operator has, they've got their LTE bearers there. And what we're going to now do is we're going to, and if you saw the previous slide, opportunistically utilize unlicensed, and it looks like 5 gigahertz is what they're looking at mostly for this. So 5 gigahertz unlicensed to opportunistically boost the downlink channel, right? Or downlink capacity, I should say. And so you can see here we're showing some number of channels in 5 gigahertz being utilized as a supplemental downlink to that client by the operator. I'm trying to remember what else I wanted to say here from my notes. LTE is inherently or natively a full duty cycle technology, right? Well, I should say that at least in the FDD mode or in the frequency division version of it, it assumes that it has the entire channel, and it schedules the MAC to talk to the various clients that are in the cell at that time. A little bit of an aside, but this whole idea of supplemental downlink is interesting. It's a little bit easier to implement on the client, right? You don't need to necessarily do all the PAs and things like that to do the transmit channel. And it's one thing that we think might be interesting in looking at this from a Wi-Fi specific terms, or in Wi-Fi specific terms with regards to how to best use 60 gigahertz. So think about an 11AC client that could opportunistically, grab some of the 60 gigahertz spectrum and use that as a supplemental downlink with Wi-Fi. So there are things that we can learn. That's one of the points I wanted to make here. There are definitely some things that we can learn as an industry from what 3GPP is proposing. And think about how to use 60 gigahertz and whether we could use it as a way to boost downlink. And it would make the clients a lot easier in terms of especially high frequency PAs. And I'm not going to pretend that I really know a whole lot about that, but I've talked to smart people who do. So. Fair existence with Wi-Fi. So again, the presentation from 3GPP to IEEE, and this is where I kind of want you to engage, so just bear with me for a few more minutes. LAA should not impact Wi-Fi services more than an additional Wi-Fi network on the same carrier, and 3GPP carrier is channel, right? On the same carrier. And then these metrics could include throughput latency jitter. So this was one of the mandates that 3GP put out in terms of the beginning of the study item and how it was to be conducted. And we're at the point now where there's I know, I'm close. Now he just interrupted my train of thought, but we're at the point now where there's a lot of simulation activity and testing activity going on right now, where different 3GPP members are out doing simulations. We're actually doing actual testing and bringing that back to 3GPP, and they're going to support the statement that LA won't impact Wi-Fi more than another Wi-Fi network would. And then exact metrics to be defined. And as far as I know, those exact metrics have still not been defined. So again, I'd encourage you all to try to engage as much as you can around the simulations that are going on and the kind of the analysis of those results. So when I think of LAA Wi-Fi coexistence, I envision it as the spectrum. So it's on the far left, you kind of got how LTE works, or it's most similar to how LTE works, and then on the far right, you've got sort of what's most similar to Wi-Fi. And there are really a range of proposals that cover this gamut. So everything from doing some initial sensing on the channel. Okay, it's not in use or it's lightly loaded. So I set up shop and do my full duty cycle on that channel, which basically means nothing that's doing CSMA-CA is going to like that channel from then on. To adaptive duty cycle, which means I do some initial sensing, determine approximately what percentage of the channel I can use, and then I grab it, and I grab 25% of the airtime or 50% of the airtime, and I do my duty cycle within those blocks. Two things that are much more similar to Wi-Fi, where you do a clear channel assessment, per UTX op. So a few things. In terms of this session, or in terms of sort of our group and the wireless LAN professionals, I know Andrew wrote a blog recently on just the impacts of contention in Wi-Fi and latency. Read that blog and read it in light of some of these proposals. And then I know Gregor is doing a session on Thursday regarding co-channel interference and contention. And I would encourage you also to kind of view that or take that in light of this. There's information on Qualcomm's website about this, and then probably the one thing that I would really recommend you do is there's a blog that's run by Cable Labs. So if you go to, I think it's cablelabs.com. Do you guys know the .com or .org, but whatever. Go to Cable Labs website. There's a blog there, and one of the engineers is a guy named Joey Padden, and he's been writing actually a good number of posts recently about Wi-Fi LAA coexistence and talking about how different listen before talk implementations would work. What can we learn from LTE about potentially how to make spectral efficiency better, but what do they need to learn from us about how to utilize a shared channel or shared spectrum better, and specifically with regards to channel assessment, back-off algorithms, and those sorts of things. So I would put a plug in for all three of these. Qualcomm's, this was Qualcomm's demo at CES. I don't have time to talk about it. This was what 802 just recommended back to 3GPP, so I do want to make sure I cover this. So the 802 committee came back to 3GPP and said, well, we've done some analysis, and here are a few things that we think could benefit your process. So, incorporate truncated exponential backoff. So again, talking about, channel access and contention windows. And then a lot of it had to do with the simulation and testing parameters and what the inputs are there. So I don't have time to go into it, but make sure that we're doing not just downstream FTP type traffic, but do some stuff that's a little bit more interactive, is latency sensitive, and then specifically, if you really want to know what the effects are on Wi-Fi, we certainly need to be including things like higher modulation rates and factoring RTS and CTS, which were optional in the simulation. Last slide. So last thing, when I look at unlicensed options for a mobile network operator, at this point, I see these sort of as the benefits on either side. So for Wi-Fi, I see cost. Even with LTE, LAA, it looks like it'll be a fraction of the cost, because LAA is typically going to be implemented in a licensed small cell, and those tend to run 10x the cost of an access point. Indoor presence, so Wi-Fi is firmly established indoors and has been carrying the wireless data load for a while. Non-cellular devices, so Wi-Fi works on a lot of stuff that don't have cellular radios in them. Roaming footprint, kind of going back to Hotspot 2.0, and even with non-Hotspot 2.0, talking about edge roam, talking about what Liberty Global and Comcast have recently agreed to do with roaming. People are starting to link their Wi-Fi footprints, and there's a lot of Wi-Fi out there, and that's a good way for MNOs to make use of unlicensed. On the benefit side for LAA, I think if I was an MNO, I would look at it, and the thing that they really like is that direct EPC integration, right? So with LAA, that unlicensed downlink just it looks like a downlink channel to them. I mean, it talks to their MME and their packet data something gateway, PGW, just the way that a regular licensed eNode B does. So the direct EPC integration is a big thing, and it's something that Wi-Fi it really natively isn't going to be able to address. I mean, there's ways that we can integrate or interwork Wi-Fi with a mobile core, but it's not really a direct integration today. User experience, I put an asterisk next to this because today the user experience is better on cellular, and I don't think we can really argue against that. You know, you're in range, you connect, it's secure. You know, with Hotspot 2.0, it's a little bit different equation. So that's why I asterisk that, and that's one of the reasons I feel like, you know, if you know, just have an intrinsic or gut reaction that you know, this is something you don't want to see successful, then you should be a Hotspot 2.0 proponent, in my opinion. So in spectral efficiency, that's another advantage that a lot of people are touting for LA. I double asterisk that one just because I feel like a lot of those spectral efficiency claims are based on sort of the way that they're envisioning the MAC layer being utilized. And you know, whether it's an adaptive duty cycle or a full duty cycle, well, yeah, that has a lot of impact on the spectral efficiency, if that's your assumption. So if they go more towards a Wi-Fi coexistence, you know, with you know, channel sense before each TX op, then some of that might go away. We're over, so I'm going to stop there. I'm happy to stick around. Thank you all very much. I'll be around for the next couple of days.